what is a transition patent application, and what are some practice tips for establishing PGR eligibility when dealing with a transition application?
I can start if folks want. So the way I think about these is, it's a patent where you're claiming back to, to some parent applications, and so that maybe, you're the sort of the problematic patent when you're trying to think about whether to file a PGR is one where maybe it was filed, that application itself, or the patent that you're thinking about challenging was filed, as a post AIA, after the AIA date, but it claims priority back to something that that comes from, pre-AIA times. And so, you technically aren't entitled to that earlier priority chain and, that early priority date unless you can, unless you had written description enablement support in those earlier applications. So, you end up in a position of needing to, depending on sort of which side you're on, if you're on petitioner or patent owner side, tracing that back all the way, if you're, potentially if you're patent owner, but if you're petitioner, trying to show that, you are entitled to break that chain of priority essentially. And, by showing that earlier application, the pre-AIA application, doesn't have written description or enablement support, that follows along into your subsequent application. So that's, I sort of alluded to earlier, the possibility of bringing a 112 challenge in your PGR, and sometimes that has interplay with your priority chain date claims. And maybe Jason or Megan can state that in a more articulate way than I just did, but that was my try.
Well, I do think there. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Megan.
Oh, no, go ahead, Jason.
All right. There are some games that people have played with this, where you have claims that maybe aren't entitled to priority back to the earliest, a pre-AIA application. And there have been times when people have said, you know what, we're going to disclaim those from our patent. We're going to treat those as if they didn't exist, and they certainly don't exist once the disclaimer happens. So you no longer have PGR jurisdiction. You cannot institute board, on this PGR, because there are no claims anymore that are subject, that were essentially AIA claims. The board has rejected those types of attempts, and it's a reflection in the AIA. There are certain assessments that are made in the AIA on a claim-by-claim basis, but there are other assessments that are made on a patent-by-patent basis. So if you're familiar with the time bar for IPRs, 315B, you look at, has the patent been asserted? You look at the filing date of a complaint, and you have a year to file an IPR. It doesn't matter whether the patentee asserted all the claims that you're trying to challenge, or if they only asserted one claim and you're trying to challenge different claims later. The time bar applies at the patent level. It's not looked at from a claim level. They might have asserted only claim one, but the time bar clock is ticking on every claim in that patent from that point forward. It's kind of similar in the PGR context, where if you have even a single claim that at any point was a post-AIA claim, even if that was canceled before issuance, and even if you've disclaimed it later after issuance, the patent as a whole becomes a PGR eligible patent. So you just have to be a little bit careful when you're looking at the AIA, and whether you're looking at claim by claim analysis or patent level analysis. And this is one of those that's at the patent level.
So on the topic of tips and tricks for addressing PGR eligibility, to preemptively address the argument that the petitioner selected the wrong flavor of PTAB trial, in other words, incorrectly filing a PGR instead of an IPR. Petitioners sometimes concurrently file both an IPR and a PGR in order to basically allow the petitioner to hedge its bets in the event that the challenge patent is not in fact PGR eligible. So how common if at all, is that approach? And in what types of circumstances might a belts and suspenders approach like that make sense?
I think we've only like seen in the context of when there's like a big question on priority, where even maybe the team's unresolved on it, or there's disagreement between, client and the team. And so I think it is, and particularly for bigger clients, that it's worth paying both filing fees and filing both and seeing how it turns out. I don't, initially you always think, well, maybe it's going to be hard because you're going to be arguing out of both sides of your mouth. It's really not when you kind of put it all together and you say, we think it's priority based on this. If you disagree, then IPR, here you go. Strategically, we do tend to line up the two so that, we don't use different prior art one versus the other. We will use similar grounds and things like that. But I think that's the major context that's coming up. I don't know another reason why you would probably file both, other than there's a priority issue and it may not be PGR eligible.